At that company holiday party, I reached out to hug my husband. Nothing dramatic, just a small touch, a reminder that we were still us. But he shoved me so hard my wine nearly hit the floor. "Don't touch me." He snapped loud enough for the whole room to hear. His sister pulled me aside with a half-pitying smile and asked, "Bad night?" I smiled back, but mine had teeth. "Last one, actually." And by morning, I was gone. No fight, no tears. Just a note on the kitchen counter, and a silence I'd been carrying for far too long finally broke open. My name is Meredith Caldwell, and this is how everything fell apart before I finally put myself back together. I stood under the cold crystal glow of the grand ballroom at the Fairmont, the kind that made everyone look sharper, richer, more put together than they actually were. Pinnacle Financial Group's annual holiday party was in full swing, glasses clinking, colleagues laughing too loudly, a DJ trying to convince us all that this was fun. But inside, I felt like a misplaced guest at my own life. The marketing department had been buzzing about this party for weeks. Our whole suburban circle of working moms had planned coordinated outfits, arranged babysitters, treated it like the social event of the season. I'd spent an hour getting ready, choosing the navy dress Preston complimented last Christmas, applying makeup with the careful precision of someone who rarely wore it anymore. For the first time in months, I felt like the woman I used to be before marriage became a series of compromises. I spotted Preston across the room, surrounded by his colleagues, posture straighter than usual, suit a little too perfectly fitted, smile a little too performative. The finance team always dominated these events. Bigger bonuses, louder voices, wives who looked like they'd stepped out of magazines. I'd never quite fit into that world, but I'd learned to navigate it. I walked toward him with a quiet hope, just a small gesture, a simple touch on his waist, a quick photo to show we were still a united front. We'd been distant lately, ships passing in the hallway of our Westfield home, conversations limited to logistics and bills. Tonight felt like an opportunity to reconnect, to remember why we'd chosen each other 8 years ago. Before my fingers even settled, he jolted back as if I burned him, his voice slicing through the noise. "Don't touch me." The words hung in the air like smoke. Conversations around us broke for half a second. Faces turned, my cheeks flamed with a heat I couldn't control. I forced a smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes but keeps you alive, and swallowed the humiliation inch by inch. The other wives noticed. I could feel their eyes, their sudden interest in their drinks, the way conversations shifted to protect me from the embarrassment. Next to him stood Bryce Manning, his expression unreadable, the spark of something smug flickering under indifferent eyes. At that moment, I didn't understand what it meant, but my body felt it before my mind did. Something here was wrong. Bryce was younger, maybe 29, with the kind of confidence that came from never having to doubt yourself. He'd joined the company 6 months ago, and Preston mentioned him constantly, too constantly. Chloe appeared beside me, gentle fingers on my arm. "Bad night," she whispered. Preston's sister had always been caught between loyalty to him and genuine affection for me. Tonight, her eyes held something I couldn't name. Knowledge, maybe, or guilt. I answered with a smile too calm to be natural. "Last one, actually." She blinked hard, as if she knew more than she could say. When I looked back, Preston and Bryce were laughing too close, too familiar. Not the kind of closeness that comes from colleagues, but from secrets. Bryce's hand brushed Preston's shoulder as he leaned in to whisper something. The gesture lasted a second too long, carried an intimacy that made my stomach clench. As the party droned on, I saw him in a new light. His new clothes. When had he started caring about designer labels? His new tone, polished and performance-ready. The way he checked his phone the moment he thought no one was looking, fingers moving with the urgency of someone feeding a craving. Everything he did felt curated for someone else, not me. The suburban wives I'd grown friendly with over the years drifted closer, offering subtle support. Jennifer from the PTA mentioned how handsome Preston looked tonight, but her eyes held questions. Miranda from our neighborhood book club kept glancing between Preston and Bryce with the sharp attention of someone who specialized in reading social dynamics. These women knew the language of marriage trouble. We'd all witnessed divorces tear through our careful suburban ecosystem. I stepped out onto the hotel terrace, the Chicago wind cutting straight through my dress. The city sparkled below, lights reflecting off the lake like scattered diamonds. And for the first time in 8 years of marriage, I felt something inside me loosen, a thread pulling free. The hurt didn't explode. It settled like a quiet storm, the kind that destroys slowly without raising its voice. When I walked into the bathroom and caught my reflection, eyes rimmed with humiliation and anger, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. There was something Preston was hiding from me. And whatever it was bigger than a bad night at a company party. I thought about the past few months, the late nights he claimed were work, the new gym membership he used religiously, the way he'd started locking his phone, the credit card statements with charges I didn't recognize, restaurant receipts from places we'd never been together, hotel parking fees that made no sense if he was really working late at the office. Standing there in the marble-tiled bathroom of one of Chicago's finest hotels, surrounded by the muffled sounds of people who seemed to know how to enjoy their lives, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to be the wife who pretended not to see, who made excuses for behavior that made her feel small. The house in Westfield was painfully quiet when I walked in. Too clean, too orderly, the kind of silence that made you feel like a stranger in your own home. Preston muttered something about being tired and went straight to shower. Then came the sound that froze me in place, the click of the bathroom lock. He had never locked a door in this house. I stood in the hallway, listening to the running water, feeling the distance between us widen like a canyon. The house we'd bought 3 years ago suddenly felt like a museum of a marriage that was dissolving while I wasn't looking. Wedding photos on the mantle, vacation souvenirs from happier times, the kitchen island where we used to eat breakfast together before work became his excuse for everything. I went into the bedroom to gather his clothes for laundry, and that's when I saw it, shimmering faintly under the overhead light, champagne-colored highlighter dust on his collar. I never used that shade. I rarely used makeup at all, especially not the dramatic contouring that left this particular shimmer. My hands went cold. It wasn't proof, but it was a beginning. I moved on autopilot, pulling open the zipper of his gym bag to toss in a towel. Something hard knocked against my hand. A phone, not his iPhone, not one I recognized. A cheap Android with a cracked screen protector. My pulse thudded as I powered it on. No passcode, no attempt to hide, almost as if he believed I would never question him. A string of messages appeared immediately. Room 519, same place. I want you tonight. Another. Can't wait to feel you again. The timestamp showed they'd been sent during the party, while I was standing on that terrace questioning my sanity. The air left my lungs in one quiet, controlled exhale. I didn't rage, didn't burst into tears. Instead, I felt myself falling into a quiet numbness, a free fall that felt strangely like relief. The truth wasn't just infidelity, it was disrespect, deliberate distance, years of small betrayals I never let myself see until now. The shower stopped. I powered down the phone, placed it exactly where I'd found it, and arranged the rest of his clothes as if nothing had happened. When Preston emerged, hair damp, wearing the navy pajama set I'd bought him last birthday, he looked like a stranger wearing my husband's face. "How was your evening?" he asked, toweling his hair with the casual indifference of someone who'd forgotten he'd humiliated me 3 hours earlier. "Illuminating," I said, and watched his eyes for any flicker of recognition. Nothing. He was either a better actor than I'd given him credit for, or he genuinely believed he was untouchable. The next afternoon, I met Chloe at a cafe in Lincoln Park, 20 minutes from both our homes but far enough from Westfield that we wouldn't run into the suburban mom network. I danced around the truth, letting her fill in the blanks. She kept stirring her latte long after the foam dissolved, eyes shifting, jaw tight with the weight of something she didn't want to say. "Preston's been different lately," I started carefully. "Distant, working late constantly. I barely see him anymore." Chloe's spoon clinked against ceramic. He's under a lot of pressure at Pinnacle. The new position, new responsibilities. What new position? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Preston hadn't mentioned any promotion, any change in his role. We'd been married 8 years. When had he stopped telling me about his career? Her face went pale. Didn't he tell you about the senior analyst track? The one Bryce recommended him for? When I finally mentioned Preston acting different, colder, distracted, secretive, she slipped further. Bryce influences Preston more than you think. Her words landed heavy, too heavy to be casual, too deliberate to be accidental. She looked like she regretted them immediately, but it was too late. I saw something in her expression, a warning wrapped in guilt. What do you mean by that? I pressed. They spend a lot of time together, more than normal for colleagues. Late nights, weekend meetings, business trips that... She stopped herself, coffee cup halfway to her lips. That what, Chloe? That don't always seem to be about business. The cafe suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. Around us, other women met for their afternoon rituals. Book club planning sessions, PTA strategy meetings, the careful choreography of suburban female friendship. I envied their problems, their concerns about soccer schedules and holiday parties, and whether their teenagers were vaping. Has he said anything to you? About us? About our marriage? Chloe's silence stretched too long. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. He said he's been feeling trapped, that he needs space to figure out who he really is. The words hit like ice water. Not, we're having problems, or we need counseling, or any of the normal language couples used when they hit rough patches. Trapped. As if our 8 years together had been a prison sentence instead of a choice we made every day. When did he say this? A few weeks ago, maybe a month. He called me after one of his late nights, said he was questioning everything, his career, his life choices, his... She couldn't finish the sentence. His marriage. She nodded, tears threatening. Mary, I didn't know how to tell you. I kept hoping he was just going through something, a midlife crisis or work stress, something that would pass. That night, I stood on our deck, looking out at the lights stretching across the western suburbs. Everything felt suspended, fragile, sharpened by suspicion. Other houses glowed with the warm light of families eating dinner together, helping with homework, living the lives I'd thought we were building. My heart wasn't breaking anymore. It was preparing. I held the burner phone in my hand as if it were a key to the truth, a key to the end, a key to the beginning of something I never expected, a version of me that wasn't afraid to look straight into the dark. If Preston was hiding something, I would find it. And when I did, nothing in our lives would look the same again. Chloe asked me to drive up to Starved Rock with her, the kind of quiet request that already told me she wasn't bringing me there for scenery. The air felt thin, colder than the weather should have allowed, and neither of us spoke for most of the drive. When we finally parked overlooking the Illinois River, I turned to her because I couldn't hold it in any longer. Chloe, tell me what you know about Preston, about whoever he's seeing. She didn't answer. She just stared at the water until her lashes trembled. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. They got close too fast. Preston and Bryce, they work late, meet up outside of office hours, disappear without telling anyone. People at Pinnacle noticed. I noticed. Hearing her say it made the winter air feel sharper against my skin. Chloe wasn't dramatic. She didn't gossip. If she said it, it was because she had seen something she couldn't unsee. She kept twisting her fingers together like she was choosing between loyalty and fairness. Preston said he wanted to start over, she whispered. Start fresh without any burdens. The word hit me harder than the cold air. Burdens. And he meant me. When did he say this? Last month. He came to my apartment after midnight, drunk, talking about how he'd wasted his 20s on the wrong choices, how he felt like he was living someone else's life. She looked at me with eyes full of guilt. He said meeting Bryce made him realize what he'd been missing. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just nodded because the shock was too deep to rise to the surface yet. The pieces were forming a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore anymore. When I returned home, my phone rang as soon as I stepped through the door. It was Diane, Preston's mother. She didn't bother with small talk. "Preston needs space," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "You should give him some room to grow. Don't hold him back." Her tone was calm, practiced, like she had rehearsed it, like they had talked about this already. Something in her voice made my chest tighten. I told her that I wasn't the one pulling away, and she exhaled sharply as if I were a child refusing to understand. "Bryce is helping Preston get to a better place in his career. As long as no one drags him down, he'll rise fast." The implication was as clear as the breath fogging in front of me. They weren't just aware of the situation, they supported it. Later that night, unable to sleep, I opened the second phone again. A new message appeared. "Do not let anyone find out about us. Too much at stake now." My skin crawled. Whoever sent it wasn't just involved. They were hiding something calculated, deliberate. The walls of the house felt too tight, too loaded with secrets, and I knew I couldn't keep guessing. I needed the truth, even if it tore everything apart. By sunrise, I was sitting across from Vincent Rodriguez, a private investigator with steady eyes and a voice that didn't waver. His office in Oak Brook was modest but professional, the kind of place where suburban wives came when their perfect lives started cracking at the seams. After listening to everything, he leaned back in his chair. "If what you're describing is real," he said, "this won't take long. Men like your husband get careless when they think they're smarter than their wives." His certainty scared me more than the suspicion itself. I paid his retainer with money from an account Preston didn't know about. My escape fund started years ago on the advice of my divorced sister. "What will you need?" I asked. "Time and permission to follow them both for 72 hours. He pulled out a contract that felt heavier than it should have. "Are you sure you want to know the truth, Mrs. Caldwell? Sometimes ignorance really is bliss." I signed without hesitation. When I left his office, snow had started falling over Chicago. Not a storm, just small flakes drifting down soft and quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. I stood at the window, watching the city blur under white, knowing my life would not return to what it had been. Not after this, not ever. 3 days later, Vincent's name flashed on my phone. His tone was calm, but beneath it, I heard the weight of something he was preparing me for. "I have what you asked for," he said. "You should come in." My hands shook the entire drive back to his office, even though my mind felt strangely steady, like my emotions had gone somewhere else to protect me. The suburban shopping centers and chain restaurants that lined Route 83 looked different somehow, as if I were seeing them through glass. When Vincent slid the first envelope across the desk, I hesitated before opening it. Inside were photos of Preston and Bryce walking into the Westin downtown together, shoulders brushing, laughing like two people who had forgotten to hide. In another picture, Bryce's hand rested lightly on Preston's back as they entered the elevator. The gesture sliced straight through me. That wasn't friendly, that was intimate. Vincent placed a USB drive on the table and met my eyes as if asking permission. I nodded. On his laptop screen, the footage showed Preston and Bryce leaving a hotel room the next morning. Preston wearing Bryce's shirt, hair mussed, the kind of satisfied exhaustion that comes after a night of passion. My breath left me in a single uneven exhale. It wasn't speculative, it wasn't ambiguous. It was a double life he hadn't even bothered to disguise. "They act like they don't care who sees," Vincent said quietly. "Like they're used to this." I stared at the screen until it blurred, not from tears, but from the realization that Preston had already built an entire world where I didn't exist. When I returned home, everything felt too neat, too intentional. Fresh sheets, air freshener, laundry folded perfectly. He was erasing evidence, maybe not consciously, but instinctively. I opened the second phone again. A new message had arrived. "Last night was incredible. Same time Friday." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't an impulsive affair. This was routine, habit, a schedule they'd maintained while I planned dinner menus and paid mortgage bills and lived like a wife in a marriage that had already ended. Later, while searching for a tax document in his home office desk, my fingers brushed against a thin envelope shoved far back in a drawer. Inside were hotel receipts stretching back months. Different dates, same hotel, same room number. My knees weakened. This wasn't new. This wasn't a slip. It was a system Preston had maintained with precision while I worried about our credit card debt and whether we needed new gutters. I called Chloe, voice tight, asking her to stop hiding things. She didn't deny it anymore. I knew they were too close, she confessed. Preston told me to stay out of it. He said if I interfered, he'd cut me off completely. Her voice cracked with guilt. I didn't know how to tell you without losing my brother. I understood her fear, but it didn't soften the truth. This wasn't just a marriage breaking. It was a betrayal woven through months, hidden beneath silence, protected by people who should have warned me. When I hung up, I looked around the house, our framed photos, our shared life, our memories scattered like props on a stage that no longer belonged to me. I finally saw it clearly. This wasn't a man slipping away. This was a man who had deliberately stepped into another life, one where I had no place. And for the first time since the night of that party, the shock gave way to resolve. Whatever truth lay ahead, I would face it head on. Because someone needed to stop pretending. And it wasn't going to be me. The next morning, I met with attorney Amanda Cross, sharp-eyed, calm, the kind of woman whose presence steadied you even when your world was collapsing. Her downtown office overlooked Grant Park, and I could see joggers and dog walkers living their normal lives while I planned the destruction of mine. I told her everything. She listened without flinching, taking notes with the methodical precision of someone who'd heard these stories before. When I finished, she took a long breath and said, "You're not in a marriage anymore. You're in a war, and you need to fight like it." Her words landed hard but clear. For the first time in weeks, I felt myself shift, not as a wife trying to save something broken, but as a woman preparing for the fight of her life. Illinois is a no-fault state, but adultery can affect asset distribution, spousal support, she explained. With this evidence, we can ensure you're protected financially. More importantly, we can file first, which means you control the narrative. Vincent's latest report came that afternoon. Preston hadn't been at the office on the nights he claimed he was buried in work. Instead, there were hotel bookings, restaurant charges, and late-night parking logs that placed him everywhere except home. Every time Bryce was involved, paying for rooms, making arrangements, covering their tracks just enough to feel clever. Vincent then revealed something I didn't expect. Bryce had been fired from his previous firm for an inappropriate relationship with a married male colleague. Preston wasn't Bryce's first entanglement. He was just the newest one. That evening, I arranged everything on the coffee table: photos, receipts, hotel invoices, bank statements, text transcripts, and the audio recordings. Not hidden, not subtle, lined up like a gallery of truth. When Preston walked in from another late night at the office, he froze. He saw my name on the divorce petition, not his, mine. His face paled before he pulled himself together, trying to summon the version of himself who always talked his way out of consequences. "What is this?" he demanded. "Why would you do this first?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't match his anger. I told him I'd known for weeks that while he was planning to blindside me, I was preparing to expose the truth. I placed each piece of evidence in front of him, describing exactly where I found it. He went from red to pale to something close to gray. When I played the audio of Bryce calling him easy to control, he snapped. He shouted that it was taken out of context, that Bryce didn't mean it, that I was twisting things. Watching him crack was strangely quiet inside me. I felt no triumph, just clarity. I told him the court had frozen our joint accounts, that the house was now legally assigned to me during proceedings, that Pinnacle Financial would be notified of his misconduct, that his attempt to move money had been documented. He lunged for his phone, calling Bryce over and over, pacing like a caged animal. Every call went straight to voicemail. Bryce had already distanced himself the moment he sensed trouble. He dropped onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands, shoulders shaking with something between anger and panic. For the first time since this all began, he looked small. I stood in front of him and let the truth land. You didn't betray me by loving someone else. You betrayed me because you thought I would never stand up for myself. Then I walked away, leaving him sitting in the ruins of everything he had tried to build behind my back. By morning, Pinnacle Financial had suspended Preston pending an internal investigation. Bryce had submitted his resignation and disappeared. No calls, no messages, nothing. He left Preston to burn alone. I drove toward downtown Chicago as the sun rose, the skyline glowing gold through the windshield. The road felt open in a way my life hadn't felt in years. In my new apartment on State Street, I made myself dinner, sat on the floor surrounded by boxes, and felt a peace I couldn't explain. My future didn't scare me anymore. It felt unwritten. It felt open. It felt mine.